Hello everyone, Nightfire Ox here, and it is almost time for Halloween. With Halloween comes haunted houses, trick-or-treating, and costume parties. But today, I'm gonna take you down one of the oldest and most haunted towns in my home state. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, I guarantee St. Charles' fascinating history will intrigue you. Let's dive into St. Charles, Missouri. The Lost Graveyard, formerly known as the Boromo Cemetery. This cemetery ran from 1750 through 1853. What is known today as the Lost Graveyard was once a large cemetery that covered over 9 square blocks and at its height held over 300 bodies. Eventually, most of the bodies were relocated to another cemetery and remain there today. However, the area located nearest the church was known as the Potter's Field. People buried here were typically people no one knew or cared to know. They were buried without ever being identified. Their burial consisted of being buried in a wooden coffin or just thrown into the dirt. Either way, the coffins have all long since disintegrated, leaving only the bodies behind. Not only that, because no one knew their people, it wasn't all that unusual for 2 or 3 bodies to be thrown into the same grave. The church that rests in the location now is not the original church. However, it is an exact replica of the church that stood there in the year 1820. The project to rebuild the church was a rather big one. It even included bringing in archaeologists to locate the original foundation, and the church was built right on top of where the original sat. Another interesting thing about this church, for the living, is that this church is in operation. The church operates once a month, and in recent years has even hosted weddings. People may wonder why they rebuilt the church, and the reason is, it stands to signify the location of the original Boromo Cemetery. The interesting thing about this old cemetery is that no matter where you go, you are walking on top of someone's grave. Even more spooky is that with the receding land in recent decades, the bodies of the deceased only lay 12 to 18 inches below the surface now. For my foreign pals, that's 30 to 45 centimeters. Any kind of digging in this area will net you a body. However, I wouldn't try it. It is illegal. In fact, in 1982, they built a retaining wall around the church and dug up 4 graves in the process. It is estimated that 15 to 30 people are still buried in this graveyard. However, that is a conservative estimate. In even more recent years, some Girl Scouts were playing in the area. The girls were running around the church, scaring each other, and ran into a bit of a problem. You see, the ground around the church is incredibly soft. One of the girls jumped out, literally, and fell right through the ground to a grave underneath. Talk about traumatizing. This area is known to be incredibly haunted. Some of the most well-known sightings in this area are of a woman who died from complications of pregnancy. She was very poor, and so therefore the only nice clothes she had was her wedding dress. She was buried in her dress, and people often see the young woman in white, staring at the church, looking as if she's praying. Witchy Business. If you stop along Main Street today, you may notice quite a few witchy destinations on the strip. However, witches have not always been as accepted in the town like they are today. In the 1960s, a myth began to spread around town about the story of Molly Crenshaw. Molly was a supposed witch who lived in St. Charles County in the middle of the 19th century. One year, after a poor harvest, the local villagers blamed Molly and her witchcraft for the event. The villagers killed Molly. Afterwards, the villagers worried that Molly would return and seek revenge, so they chopped her body up into pieces and scattered her body in separate graves. The folklore goes that Molly's body parts inch closer and closer every year, and one day she will be made whole again and seek the vengeance she desires. Molly Crenshaw did exist. However, she wasn't a witch in the 1800s and most certainly won't be seeking any vengeance. In reality, she led a quiet life as a spinster and schoolteacher. She also wasn't killed by an angry mob, but rather died of carbolic acid in 1913. Although Molly Crenshaw wasn't a witch, the town does have a history of witchcraft. The place that currently holds a local cafe known as Magpie's Cafe was once known as the Witch's House. Interestingly enough, the building was once occupied by a school of witchcraft that was founded in 1968. The third floor once held many coven meetings. In 1972, it became the first federally recognized Wiccan church. The Old Theater. On St. Charles Main Street, you will find a building that sits right next to the Historical Society. The bottom floor was a bank, the second floor was a theater, and the third floor was where the Oddfellows would stay. Today, the building is owned by a technology company. The second floor is said to be extremely haunted. The technology company that owns the building now has a room that used to be the theater dressing rooms. It now holds all their secure, highly sensitive servers. No one may enter the room unless they have a pass card and the code. On top of that, the room keeps track and records those who come in and out of there. The spooky part about the room is that 2 to 3 times a year, the door to the server room will be left open. Now the interesting thing is, no one can leave the building for the night unless that room is locked shut. The building will not lock unless that room is locked. However, a few times a year, after everyone has gone home, the employees will come in the next day to find the door open. Not only that, but the camera they have set to record in the room when people come in and out of there has recorded the door opening, but no one is caught on camera. Perhaps it's an old spirit checking on the people getting dressed to make sure they are ready for the stage. The Gallows. On April 17th, 1904, 2 men were executed upon the gallows. This was the last time the gallows were ever in operation, as hangings ended shortly after that. The 2 criminals hanged were Charles May and John Taylor. These 2, however, may have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were hung on circumstantial evidence. These 2 were not well liked in town and were in fact criminals. However, they may have been innocent of the crime they were hanged for. Nevertheless, there wasn't much to do in 1904, and with it being the last time the gallows were going to be used, it was a big event. Imagine going to a rock concert, but instead of hearing a band play, you watch people die. They brought in ponies, and people woke up early to get good seats, all the works. People often report hearing the sound of galloping and the smell of rotting flesh on the alleyway where the gallows used to be. Perhaps a residual energy from when a carriage would take away the rotting corpses. The suicide. The sheriff at the time, Ebenezer Curtis, was on the case of Charles May and John Taylor. Curtis did not feel great about the fact that he more than likely killed 2 innocent men. Curtis was very distressed by his deed and shot himself in his apartment a few months later. However, when Curtis shot his gun, he did not die immediately. He managed to drag himself down the stairs and into the alleyway, leading to the apartment before he finally died. His body was found the next morning. To this day, with a UV light, you can still see where Curtis spent his final living moments. A blood stain is still very much evident in the alleyway. The blood stain remains due to a mixture of chlorine and ammonia, used to clean the area after a colony of bats made it their home. If they continue to clean that alleyway thoroughly, then it will remain for another 100 years. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and have a spooky Halloween.
Log structures do not do well in the Midwest. They have a tendency to fall down after about 50 years. Originally, this location was known as the California House. It was essentially a 5-star hotel. Nicest place in town you could stay. Most expensive place in town you could stay. Called the California House because we are right now standing on approximately the beginning of the Santa Fe Trail. You could get a stagecoach here that would take you as far as Kansas City. No transportation beyond Kansas City, but the trails ran all the way to the gold fields in California. Now when that traffic dropped off, not as many people going out to California, and certainly not as many coming back with gold in their pockets, they were unable to maintain an expensive hotel. There were cheaper places in town that you could stay. So it didn't take long for the nature of the business to change. So look at the second floor, I think it's quite apparent. That's where you would go to meet the ladies. This location was a functioning brothel as late as 1925.